So I should just start straight off.
So people are chiming in, as you can see in the attendees. This list will grow with time.
All right. Cool. Well, hello everyone. So this is just a talk about two degrees in particular. So it's games design and games programming. And this is at the University of Suffolk. And my name's Adam, and I lead the games design course there. So Suffolk University is located in Ipswich, which is about an hour's train ride from London, and it's on the east side of England. And it's pretty well connected as well. It's connected to Cambridge and Norwich, and then you can trail off there to other regions. So it's quite a nice place to be. It's also one of the warmer places in England, if that tickles your fancy. So I'll just go over the team that we've got. So obviously there's me. I did my PhD in Edinburgh University in psychology. I worked a bit in the games industry in the Northeast as a principal investigator looking into research and all that. Chris Janes is the course leader for games programming, and he developed what's known as the Hidden, if any of you are familiar with that. And then there's Sean, who is on the team, but he's more of a web specialist. So he doesn't really teach much on the games modules, but he's there if you want to develop your online presence. There's Steve, who worked more in the serious games industry. And he's more of he worked in sort of like military defense and creating graphics. Hello. There's Rob, who worked mainly in the non-digital sphere. So he teaches all. He's a game designer by trade. So he worked on Star Wars Battlefront, the original Star Wars Battlefront series. He was a creative director for his own company as well, and that made many #1 hits with the Margrave series. Worked on Warhammer, Power Rangers. He's worked on all sorts of stuff. Nick is our C++ specialist, but he's more on the games programming side. He works on sort of like game engine architecture and building your own engines from the ground up. And then Eddie is sort of our games historian, right? So teaching you all about the history of games, going all the way back to sort of like ancient times, right the way through to contemporary. So yeah, I'll just quickly take a look at these questions here. Yeah, we host Ludum Dare. Yeah. Ludum Dare is great. So I'll get onto that sort of like in a moment. So I'll go over both the courses, and then I'll go back to the question and answer stuff, and I'll try and sort of like explain and answer all the stuff that you might have. First of all, we are backed by our games industry panel, and this comprises of Codemasters, Ubisoft, Immersive Studios, and Sumo Digital. And what this allows us to do is really stay sort of cutting edge in the game development sphere, right? So we meet them twice a year to go over, not only to make sure what we teach is what you need upon graduation, but then we also future-proof all the stuff that you're going to be learning, so that in the future, we're always meeting the demands of industry, and we're always teaching you exactly what you need to know, for years to come, effectively. So it's a great place to be. So let's just figure out what a game designer actually does. And a lot of the answers, typically, if I ask this question, people say, we come up with ideas, or we do a bit of 3D modeling here and there, or we make levels or something like that. But really, what a game designer does is to create emotions. So triggering emotions in people, whether it's like happiness or awe or being scared or being highly motivated, right? So we create this, and we create systems which allow players to not only be motivated to play, so all the core mechanics and initial upfront stuff, but we also figure out how motivation changes over time through a series of behavioral psychology subjects. So it's all heavily based on psychology, not games art, right? So sometimes a common misconception is game design is games art, but it's not, right? So if you're interested in art, it's not really the course to be on, but it's a great one to be on if you want to create systems, right? If you want to figure out all the gameplay and balancing and everything like that. So yeah, games are an interactive experience. So that's what sets it apart from film and from games and all. From books and all that, is that you can create this experience where players are interacting directly with the medium that you've created. It's amazing. So what I'll do is go over the modules sort of briefly, and then at the end, if you want to pick out something in particular that you want me to go into detail on, I'll do that. But just because I've got 2 degrees to get through, it makes sense if I just like go through a few. So just to throw it out there, whether you're on, yeah, you can just feel free to ask questions where you like, and then I'll just scroll through and pick them out. But yeah, so whether you're on design or on programming, there are some modules that overlap and you collaborate heavily with each other, because the idea is, you know, we want to set you up so that you're working in a multidisciplinary team and you get those skills early on. So to kick things off, I'll just start with the group project then. So what that lets you do, it's a year-long project, but the first semester, you're working on sort of like game jam style projects, right? So you're in for a day, you jam it out with second-year students and other programmers and designers, and you create a game within a day. We get you doing that from day one, so that you know, we don't assume any programming knowledge or any engine knowledge to begin with. We just throw you in the deep end and say, okay, try and learn this software, try and create something, use your creativity and make something amazing. So we do that week on week. Start that about a month in, so you've got a bit of time to sort of settle and everything, right? And then in the second semester, you work on a group project which lasts about 10 weeks. And that's where you learn to develop games by simulating the game studio environment. Design methods 1 and 2 is all to do with psychology. So we teach you how to, say, trigger emotions. We teach you, you know, color theory and like aesthetics and game mechanics. So all the design theory and knowledge are in those 2 modules. Introduction to game development is an introduction to how to develop games using contemporary engines. So in the first semester, we teach you Unreal Engine using blueprints. And we also teach you an introduction to sort of C# programming as well. And by the time you hit semester 2, you will then dive into Unity, applying the fundamentals of programming to script up some gameplay. So there's a little bit of coding in game design, but it's not as heavy as games programming. But you still need to learn how to write your own gameplay scripts so that you can actually prototype the systems that you've designed, if that makes sense. And then critical game studies is the games history module. So you learn all about, you know, games from ancient times and how they've evolved and how motivation for different things changes. And you look at the arcade era and everything like that. And it also introduces you to the academic side of studying, right? So like there's like essay writing and things. An introduction to non-digital game design is all paper prototyping stuff. So learning how to balance by prototyping rapidly. So you don't need to know how to code something up. You just make a board game or you make a card game, and then you iterate that in the session, and then you play other people's games, and then you figure out how game design works like that. So that's the first year. I'll just quickly scroll up and see if there are any particular questions here that aligns with this. So yeah, programming languages. In game design, we start you off with C#, because that streamlines into Unity. But we don't, what we don't do in design is try and like expose you to a whole different range of languages, because the idea is that you learn one, you have the transferable skills to, you know, easily branch out to others. So we'd rather teach you those transferable skills rather than throwing every language under the sun at you, you know. But we teach you whatever's in demand, right? So for design, it's more C#, but you do go in programming heavily into C++. So yeah. And critical game studies, yeah, so it goes through those eras, right? So you start off sort of in ancient periods, and then you go through, yeah, pretty much a history of games and why, what it means to be, like how the identity of gamers change, right? So there are people who play games, but they don't necessarily call themselves gamers, right? So it's looking into like that discussion and debate as well. I mean, there is an online learning part of both courses, and there may be sort of video lectures and live webinars like this, but the majority of it is sort of in session. So we have our games lab in the campus, so it's more of an on-session thing rather than a remote thing. And AI, so yeah, we'll come on to that. So in the second year for game design, I'll just move these out the way. We've got a whole range of stuff here. So there's a bunch of core, and there's a couple of elective things. So managing games production is the second year version of the group project. So you're working with the first years, only this time you're taking, say, a creative lead or a lead programmer, for example, and you're managing, as it says on the tin, the production of the game. And we teach you project management techniques such as Agile, and pretty much making you understand the game development process from a more senior perspective, effectively. Advanced design methods, probably the most important one of the second year, is all to do with behavioral psychology. And that teaches you, say, motivation or habit forming, and sort of the ethics behind using behavioral psychology, right? The whole thing these days with like loot boxes and all that. So all of these are just psychological techniques you can use to encourage people to keep playing your game. And we teach you exactly how to do that. But, great power comes great responsibility and everything. So, but yeah, it's an extremely important module. Practical prototyping is pretty much more rapid prototyping from a non-design perspective, but it goes more in depth into certain principles like internal economies and sort of like mechanics and aesthetics and everything. So it's more of an intermediate part of prototyping. Games research methods is a module that's shared with programming as well. And that sets you up for your dissertation in the third year. And it also teaches you how to look at your games and figure out how to iterate on them based on certain metrics, right? So you can create an experiment where you have a playtesting session and you analyze very specific parts of that playtesting session, so certain variables, and then you can plot things and figure out what works based on that. And you can have visualization tools that show, say you're making a level, you can see where certain players move to or areas of difficulty that needs tweaking based on those metrics. So it's quite an important module from that perspective. Digital scripting is more intermediate coding. So that's all, C# or blueprinting or whatever you're more comfortable with, but it's more intermediate gameplay coding. So in terms of programming and design, that's pretty much as far as taught programming goes, right? Digital scripting and then the first year programming stuff. Because then the idea is you're the designers, right? You're developing the systems. So we give you just enough that you can make stuff yourself, but we want you to flourish fully in the design side of things. Digital scripting is it's just like if you script in games, say in Unity, you can create a C# script, which might be the movement of the player. It might be, say, if you're creating a shooter, you might have a script that controls the gun mechanics. You might have a script that controls menu navigation, right? So just all the gameplay logic, right? Yeah, it's actual programming, but we want you to cater to your strengths. So we teach blueprinting and actual C# programming in that module, but you'll be able to decide, for the actual assessment, how you want to go about doing that. And then the elective parts is these modules here. So 3D modeling is okay in terms of game design. It's not a hugely important core part of design, right? Psychology is, but we do have it there if you want to branch out and get into more of the aesthetic side of things. We don't teach you from an art point of view. We teach you from, good efficiency in polygon count, the terminology, and your knowledge of the software, and just being able to communicate using the language. And then level design, it's just another branch of programming, branch of design. And that's great if you want to be a level designer, obviously. And rapid game development, 3D modeling, we use 3ds Max. So we teach you like what the industry uses, and then you can easily transfer to Blender if you like, or Maya or something. And then rapid game development is prototyping a game every single week based on a theme. So you get a full week to do it, and then you play test everyone's games, and then you make a new game. And then the idea is at the end of it, you've got a whole series of games that you've made, and your confidence and skills in whatever you've decided to specialize in just, increase tenfold. So it's a brilliant module to get into if you want to focus on gameplay. So we've got those 3 disciplines that you can branch out into, right? And if you don't know programming, it's all good because we teach you from day one. So we assume that no one knows how to program. So it all comes, don't worry about it. And then we have a placement year, boom. So we always encourage people to go on a placement year. And that effectively means you're working in industry for a year. So we can, point you in the right direction, but you still have to go out and apply and go to interviews and everything. But then once you go on that year, you come back and then finish your final year. That's the same with programming as well. And a final year is exactly the same for programming and design, because the idea is that you're going off on your own and you're doing more independent study. So the game studio experience, you're working for a semester with an entire team, so your entire cohort, right? Just as a AAA studio would in a large team, and then you develop a game based on that. Professional practice is working for real-world clients. So you go out and you find a client, or we provide clients, right? And then they give you a brief, and then you work towards that brief. Games project is a year-long one, so that's more to do with indie game development. So we teach you AAA and the indie side, and depending on where you want to go is sort of up to you. And then the honors project is your final year dissertation, which can be on pretty much anything you're interested in. And that's quite common across all degrees in the UK. So yeah, I'll quickly go through games programming. So all of design is all psychology based effectively, with some programming in there to help you implement that. But a games programmer is completely different. So it's full on programming, but full on low level architecture stuff, right? So we go over C++, we go over all the maths that you need. So like linear algebra, for example, discrete maths, that sort of thing. Algorithms and data structures, so teaching you all about efficient code, how to measure code complexity, and C++ from day one. So it's completely different. And they both have their difficulties, Can you read the text on the PCM? Yeah, well, it's just I just picked it randomly, right? So optimizing compilers, multiple inheritance, general purpose. Look at all these things that the master race have. Oh yeah. Yeah, glorious C++ master race, because people who write in C++, they think they're the best. And maybe they are, right? So yeah, in the first year, you collaborate Introduction to Programming, Critical Game Studies, and Group Project with the designers. And I'm going to have my email at the end of here, so just make a note of that, and I can share the slides easily. Or if I can give them to the panelists, I can easily do that. Yeah, if you're interested in games programming, maths is the way to go. That's all I have to say. Like, games are built on maths, and that's just the way it is. Not just like the gameplay and logic, but like the underlying low-level architecture. So in the second year, yes, you do cover quaternions to a degree. Yeah. C++ is more of like an intermediate language, but the fundamentals are the same for any language, really. So, a variable is a variable, so teaching it as an introductory language, like teaching C# as an introductory language, is quite similar. But as you reach the second year, we go more in depth into the complexities of C++. So we still start you off as if you don't know the language, and it's all good. games programming in the second year, right? So there's game engine development, and that's a whole year for a reason. So, forget Unity, forget Unreal. What you're going to do now is make your own engine from the ground up. We don't mean make Unity. That would be crazy.
Adam, do you need any support? I just received an email.
Do I need support?
Yeah, regarding any chats or anything.
I think it's all good. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So in game engine development, you develop a full engine by yourself. But it's not developing Unity, it's making your own small engine for a very specific purpose. So if you're making a platformer, for example, you would make an engine that entirely based on that genre. And say, for example, your platformer only caters to outside environments. You wouldn't have anything to do with inside environments at all. Whereas something like Unity, that's all general purpose. So you can create any genre you like in that. But game engine development, you're focusing very specifically on one thing. And then there's AI for games. And, that's all to do with fuzzy logic and all the different AI methods that are included in games programming. There's tools development, which is a fantastic way to get into the industry. So you're making tools for software like Unreal, or you're making your own software to bridge the gap between two others. So say, for example, you've modeled a character in 3ds Max and you want to import that with the click of a button. So you could create a tool that communicates 3ds Max with Unreal. A-star is an algorithm. So that's a pathfinding algorithm. And you do learn that in AI. And you learn machine learning as well. Yeah, so you learn all that. And then programming for graphics is all shader stuff. So OpenGL, and then DirectX, all that sort of sphere. So yeah, it's all lots of different types of programming, and it's pretty full on, but it's a lot of fun. Professional placement year, once again, right? You should jump on that, get some industry experience, come back, finish your final year, which is the same as the previous one. You can't study both degrees at the same time. Although, thinking about it, I wonder if there's a legal way to do that. Anyway, it makes sense to pick your specialism. If you want to be a designer, you pick games design. If you want to be a programmer, you pick games programming. But there's plenty of modules that you share. So you're still working in groups with the other team. It's all good. Do you make money creating tools? Yeah. If you make a tool, which some students have done already, throw that on the asset store. There you go. And that's what they've done. It's great. That pretty much, sums up the degrees. And I blasted through that. I'm not sure how much time I really have left. The only thing that I would say is that, we regularly host game jams. So we host the Global Games Jam every year. We host the Girls That Game Jam. We host Ludum Dare, right, which is an amazing one to jump onto. And yeah, if you wanted to change your mind, you can swap. So we do allow that flexibility. It just depends, you can't swap in your second year, right? Because that's a bit too far. Yeah, so Ludum Dare is, it's actually, we kind of hosted it recently. There was a lot of demand from the students. So we thought, well, we've already got the facilities, so why not, right? We couldn't do it this year though, because, of the whole situation of everyone being on lockdown and all that. But yeah, we just encourage game jams where you can, because it makes you hugely employable. You shove them on your CV. In interviews, you ask, they will ask you, do you do any game jams, right? And if you say no, then it's like, is your passion really there, right? So we allow that opportunity. Also, so we teach you what you need to get a job in the AAA industry, right? But we also have the opportunity for you to make it as an indie developer as well. So there's the Transfuser Fund, which our teams win year on year. You can win up to 25 grand to start your company. We've got Biscuit Sandwich Games. We've got team behind Ruya Miracle Tea, and their game became number 6 in China. So there you go, right? There's not many games out there from a student where it becomes number 6, right? So if you want to make it in the indie sphere, like we've got the tools, we've got the facilities to allow you to flourish like that. In terms of exams, there is a maths exam, I believe, but that might be changing this September. They might be altering the assessment slightly. In design, there aren't any exams, and I think the same is becoming for programming as well. It's mainly portfolio based. So yeah, indie development. So we have this transfuser fund in the UK, and our teams tend to win it. And now they are successful making their own games in their own time. It's nice to see that. And also, we have an incubation space as well. So there's a lab that we've got in the building where, say for example, you don't have the facilities at home to create your games. We allow you to work for a year for free in our lab. So we allow that as well. Yeah, this is the University of Suffolk. I should just shove that in the chat, which is in Ipswich. There you go. And then in terms of where students have gone on to work, people have worked on Ghost Recon, Killzone, Horizon Zero Dawn. They've worked for EA, Rockstar, Ubisoft. So we have a decent track record of students being employed in the industry. So we teach you what you need. But it's all about what you put into it at the end of the day. Games is a great career to get into, but it's a lot of work. So you have to really put in the effort to succeed, and we just give you the tools to be able to do that. I'll just leave this here. So that's like the entrance requirements, and I'll just swap over to the sort of QA part here and see if there are any other questions that I've missed. Yeah, so you don't know C++, but you want to make a game in Unreal. It's fine, right? You can learn blueprints. And in fact, we teach you blueprint scripting from day one. And are there any scholarships included? That's a good question. I encourage you to go to the booth, right, where our sort of like marketing team are, and they will be able to answer that question. Let me just put on my email there. There you go. So if you're interested in programming, you can always email Chris, but you can always email me too. Is Nick here with us? What, in spirit? I'm guessing you mean Nick Thomas, right? So he's not in the chat, I don't think. But yeah, he's obviously on the team. How do psychology and games blend together? Well, if you want to make sure a player keeps coming back to play your game, you're going to need to employ behavioral psychology tactics. So creating habit forming, right, to encourage people to play your game more. That's also where loot boxes can come about, right? But there's more to it than that. Do I have a brochure? Not on me, but if you go to the booth, I'm sure they'll be able to provide you with something. Yes, we teach Unity. And my cat is like scratching the carpet. This is what happens when you work remotely, you see. We just open the door. There you go. Right. Unity or Unreal Engine for beginners? I would say Unity, to be honest, but we teach both at the beginning. So, it's fine. The whole point is transferable skill. So like one engine isn't better than the other. It's all to do with how can you script, how can you make a prototype of a game, and how does that directly transfer into other methods of development. So, a vector is a vector, right? If you need to make a player move, you create a vector and just modify its X over time. And you can do that in any engine, Let's see. Do I need experience in the main softwares in order to apply? No, you do not. So like I say, we teach you from the ground up. We don't require any experience at all. And then once you're here, we turn you into the next generation of game developer, right? And yeah, you don't really learn how to draw. Like we teach you some Photoshop, right? But once again, it's more on like color theory and everything. It's not a games art degree, you know? So if you're interested in art, it's not like game design isn't the one to sign up to be honest. So yeah, you learn a bit about animation as well, but it's like I say, it's just to get you going. It's not to teach you how to animate, you know. What level of English should you have? That's a very good question. That's a question for the booth as well. So head over to there. I think his name's Kevin. Will be able to help you in the live chat side of that. So if you go there, you'll be able to get that question answered. To get admitted into game programming, should I provide a portfolio? Yeah, so when you apply, most likely what's going to happen is there might be an interview stage, and we don't really require a portfolio. If you can provide one, great, but we don't expect it. What we want you to do is develop a professional portfolio once you're on the degree. So it'll be a bit harsh of us to expect, you know, a professional portfolio before applying. So don't worry too much. Let's say you don't find a job when you finish uni. What other options? Yeah, sure. So the great thing about games, which a lot of people don't really get, is that it's all transferable, right? So if you learn programming, you can get into any software engineering field, right? If programming is your thing. And because we teach programming in both courses, that's what you get. You've got all the options available to you. You can just as well get into, you know, the automotive industry. So for example, there's a company called Zero Light, which work with Unity to develop demos and exhibitions for cars. And you know, that's not the games industry. There are plenty of companies out there that use games technology but aren't games companies. So we do expose you to that as well. We get guest speakers coming in. We have sort of trips to industry, and we make sure that you network as best as you can so that you do see all the different fields that you can get into and you're not funneled to just games. But obviously, you know, we want you to get into the games industry, but it's just acknowledgement, right? So you could even work in the medical sphere, creating models or creating you know, demos in Unity or something else for any sort of medical tool that they might need. So for example, there was a student who created a model of an eye, and that was what and the NHS took it on, right? And that's where the professional practice comes in as well. So you can get a brief not only from the games industry but from anywhere, and you can work on that. So there's people even working for like Papa John's, you know, but they're creating applications for them. So it's not, yeah, it's all relevant stuff. Blender is a good platform to create 3D animations for games. So Blender is free. And if you want to get into 3D modeling, like it's the perfect tool, you know, for someone to just pick up and play around with, you know, whereas 3ds Max costs money. But if you're a student, you get 3ds Max for 3 years, you know. So Blender is good, and it's getting more investment. I think Ubisoft have invested in it now. But a lot of the industry, you know, in AAA, like Ubisoft, for example, they use 3ds Max or Maya. So we teach you what they are learning, and then you can easily transfer out if you need to, you know. Let's see, any other questions? Would you only use 3ds Max as a program for 3D modeling, or will you swap between them? You mean on the actual modeling module, do you change software? Yeah, no. So where is it? We teach you using 3ds Max. And yeah, that's it, right? So like the idea, once again, is transferable skills. So once you've learned one software, like within a week, you can pick up Maya, you know, it's easy. What do I like more? I do like them both, admittedly. I guess I lean more towards design because I like gameplay. Whereas someone like Chris Janes, the leader of programming, would love programming more because he likes making low-level systems and low-level architecture. So if you like writing game engines, go to programming. If you like gameplay, go to design, right? Do you think you can get a good job both as a programmer and a designer? You mean as like one single job, like a programmer designer person, or two different jobs? Because there is a role called tech designer, which is where you use blueprints or some sort of coding to, it's like a bridge between designer and programmer, right? So you can be a tech designer, and they're quite in demand, particularly in Sumo Digital. They're always hiring. And yeah, you can get a good job as both. Particularly as a designer, if you're learning all the psychology, you can easily get a job as a designer. Like it's hyper competitive. I won't try and downplay that, right? It is extremely competitive, but having that under your belt and creating a good portfolio will help you flourish, right? So if you want to become a game designer, you should be very good at drawing and 3D stuff. No way. You don't need to know how to draw or 3D model to be a good game designer, to be a game designer at all, right? And that's the common misconception, because a lot of design prior to university is all to do with like graphics and drawing, but game design is not that, right? It's creating systems and balancing and figuring out player motivation and how to get them keeping coming back to your games. And all of that is psychology based. It's not how good you draw, The arty part of game design. Yeah. So, like I say, there's the 3D modeling elective in the second year, right? That you can do. In the first year, in design methods, we go over, some Photoshop. But in terms of game design from an art perspective, it's mainly to do with making sure from a creative directive point of view, making sure you've got all of the immersive details. So if you've got a tree, for example, you can create sensory immersion by introducing wind. You can introduce vicarious emotions by having a character, say, cry, and then that will make the player feel like they're going to cry, So it's that sort of thing that you can do with the art. And then in your dissertation, you can take that in the direction that you like. But we don't teach you fine art on the games design course. So if you're looking to be able to draw well, you should either do the fine art degree in Suffolk, or you can say, audit a few of their lectures and practice that in your own time and then bring that to the table, right? Do you learn games design and games programming, or if you have to pick only one? So you pick the one course, but then there are modules that cross over with each other, so it's all good. Can you tell us more? No, I said that already. Will you learn 2D modeling? To a degree. I think I know what you mean. Do you mean like sprite animations or adding bones to a sprite to move them around and stuff? Yeah, not explicitly, but say, for example, say in year 1, introduction to game development, you get introduced to animation, but it's not for the whole semester. So what skills are most valuable as a games designer? Yeah, your knowledge of behavioral psychology, right? If you can make a game that's fun, like that's half the battle, right? It's hard enough making a game that people want to play. So if you can do that, you're on to a winner. Yeah. So it's not about how well you can code or how well you can draw, right? It's just being able to create a system that encourages players to keep coming back. How much programming can a game designer do? What do you mean? As in, how much is a game designer capable of? Because that seems very, that's not the greatest way to frame that question. Um, you focus on the front end for programming and games design. Let me reframe. Okay, I'll let you finish. Let's see. Right. Yeah. So you learn C# programming in design so that you can create the gameplay for the game. So you don't do any of the low level stuff. You don't write shaders, for example. You don't write the actual game engine. You don't optimize much. You just focus on creating the player's movement and balancing that and all the, I guess, the fun side of the game. And then in games programming, you do delve into optimization. You figure out what data structures you need, how to create different tools and the like. So it's kind of different, right? Do you get grades based on the projects? Yeah. So everything goes from first class, which is like an A, so 70%-ish, and then that goes down to like 2.2, 2.1, and third, and then a refer. So as long as you're consistently doing well, you will average out as the grade that you're most consistently getting. What's the best games ever in your opinion? It is my opinion. My favorite game is Spyro 2. I love that game on the PS1. Resident Evil as well. I love them. They're cool. How can I know? So, I mean, you can figure it out fairly early on. So what we encourage you to do is audit different lessons. And a lot of the first year is really guiding you towards what you want to do. So if you say join programming, you can always sit in on a design module. There's no harm in that. And then slowly figuring out what you want to do. And then you just let us know, and then we can, go from there. But it's good to go with what you think you want to do first to help minimize that. How many people succeed starting an indie company? In general, most people fail, right? In the world. And that's because they don't necessarily understand how much it takes. Like, you can be a great programmer, you can be a fantastic designer, but if you don't know anything about, business, you're just not really going to make it. Which lets me just slightly, very sneakily plug our Games Hub, where we do teach all of the business side, right? And that's why our teams win Transfuser, because they know how to run a business, and then they get the money needed. But yeah, it's difficult in general. If you want to get into indie, or if you want to get into AAA, it's all based on how much effort you put in. Would you code the movement script for a character? Yeah, so it's a bit of both. You could code the movement, and that's exactly what we teach you, right? How to make scripts. So you can do that. You don't have to rely on someone else. But there's also no harm in a group project, say, for a programmer to write the movement and then a designer to tweak and refine it. So you can do both if you're working on a solo versus a group project, right? Between Unity and Ubisoft, what's better? What do you mean? Unity, you mean the actual companies? They're completely different. Is it easier to make console games than PC games? In ways, yes, because you're always working towards the same architecture, whereas PC, there's a flood of different graphics cards and all that. But yeah, so we teach you, that's another thing, right? So with our Games Hub, we have funding and to buy, say, like PlayStation 4 development kits or Nintendo Switch dev kits, and then you can try it out for yourself. So that movement is super refined. You would find lots of games have super refined stuff in the polish phase of things. So Apex Legends, that's got one of the best movements I've ever seen, particularly in their weapons as well. Their weapons mechanics are really on point. I'm not sure how much time I've got left, because I feel like it was supposed to run until now, but it just depends on the organizers and how long they want this webinar to last. If they could chime in and let me know, that would be great.
Yeah, in terms of time, I think we are a bit over time.
Okay. So yeah, I can wrap up then. That's all good. So yeah, like literally, if you've got any questions, I encourage you to go over to the booth. But if you have specific questions about the course, I'm more than happy, programming or design. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to answer your questions there. Yeah, I'm always happy to take it further and not just end it all here. So make sure you write this down. If you want a copy of the slides, email me. I can send it to you. Easy. And yeah, thank you all for joining. It was quite interesting to listen to all your questions and answer them. And we'll wrap it up there. So thank you very much, everyone. No worries. I guess I'll just stop the share now.
Thank you. So just concluding the session.
Mm-hmm.